Welcome to Unheard Stories. It's a roller coaster of emotions as I uncover how my fiance and my own brother deceived me in the worst way possible, and how I turned my pain into a lesson they'll never forget. By the end of this, you'll see how I went from being a victim to reclaiming my power. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that will leave you speechless. And if you've been with us for a while, welcome back. Make sure to like, comment, and share this video with someone who needs a little reminder that life is full of twists and turns. Today, we're diving into a story that's as shocking as it is heartbreaking. Imagine finding the person you thought you'd spend the rest of your life with, a partner who completed you, only to discover they were hiding the ultimate betrayal. And what's worse, the betrayal wasn't from just anyone. It came from someone you grew up with, someone you shared your life with, your own sibling. Growing up, my family always seemed picture perfect to outsiders. My parents, Roger and Diane, loved to play the part of the ideal suburban couple, hosting barbecues in the summer and attending every school function with smiles plastered across their faces. But behind closed doors, the reality was far different. My younger brother, Eric, was their golden child, the one who could do no wrong. And me? I was the responsible one, expected to clean up every mess and bear the weight of expectations that Eric conveniently shrugged off. From the very beginning, it was clear Eric was the favorite. When we were kids, if Eric broke a vase while playing soccer in the living room, I'd get scolded for not stopping him. If Eric refused to eat his vegetables, I'd be the one grounded for not setting a better example. It didn't matter what the situation was. If something went wrong, I was to blame. The favoritism wasn't just subtle, it was blatant. When I got straight A's on my report card, my mom would give me a quick, "Good job, Adam, keep it up," before turning to Eric and asking what he wanted for dinner. But if Eric brought home even a single B on a quiz, the whole house turned into a celebration. They'd take him out for ice cream or buy him a new video game, saying, "It's important to reward effort." I remember one Christmas vividly. I'd spent months saving up my allowance to buy a gift for each family member. I bought Eric a set of action figures he'd been eyeing, only for him to tear through the wrapping paper, toss the box aside, and ask what Mom and Dad had gotten him. My parents didn't scold him for being ungrateful. Instead, they praised him for his honesty and told me, "You should learn to lighten up, Adam." Living in Eric's shadow wasn't just frustrating, it was soul-crushing. No matter how hard I worked or how much I achieved, I was never enough. My parents constantly reminded me, "You're the older one. You should know better." They never seemed to grasp the toll their favoritism was taking on me. Over time, I started doubting myself. Was I really not good enough? Did I deserve the constant criticism and neglect? While Eric basked in the unconditional love and support of our parents, I became hyper-independent. I learned to rely on myself, keeping my head down and working hard to achieve something, anything that might make them notice me. But the more I succeeded, the more they seemed to resent me. If I won an award, they'd brush it off as Adam just doing what's expected. If Eric got a participation trophy, it was a monumental achievement. By the time I was 18, I couldn't wait to leave. I earned a partial scholarship to a good university and worked 2 part-time jobs to cover the rest of my expenses. It wasn't easy. There were nights when I survived on instant noodles and 3 hours of sleep, but I was determined to prove I could make it on my own. Meanwhile, Eric dropped out of community college after 1 semester, claiming it wasn't for him. My parents, of course, didn't bat an eye. "Eric is just figuring things out," they said, as they handed him money to start his 3rd business venture, which, like the others, failed spectacularly. But that didn't stop them from bailing him out time and time again. Despite the distance I'd put between us, my family always found ways to pull me back into their toxic orbit. Holiday dinners were a nightmare. My mom would make passive-aggressive comments like, "Oh, Adam's still single? Eric's been dating someone amazing." My dad would chime in, "You should take some tips from your brother. He's so charming." It didn't matter that I was building a stable career while Eric was burning through our parents' retirement fund with one failed venture after another. To them, Eric could do no wrong. Every time I visited, I felt like I was being dragged back into the role of the scapegoat, the one who could never measure up. The emotional manipulation didn't stop at favoritism. My parents were experts at gaslighting. When I confronted them about their obvious bias, they'd laugh it off. "Oh, Adam, you're overthinking it. We love both of you equally." But their actions told a different story. One Thanksgiving, I overheard my mom on the phone with a friend, proudly bragging about how entrepreneurial Eric was. She didn't mention how his last venture had ended in debt that they had to cover. When I asked why they always made excuses for him, she snapped, "Stop being jealous. You're the successful one. Be happy for your brother." It wasn't jealousy. It was frustration. Frustration that no matter how much I achieved, I would always be second best in their eyes. By my late 20s, I was doing well in my career, working as a financial analyst for a growing firm. I had my own apartment, a stable income, and a sense of pride in how far I'd come. Eric, on the other hand, was still living at home, claiming he was waiting for the right opportunity. My parents continued to enable him, funding his lifestyle and making excuses for his laziness. Despite everything, I tried to maintain a relationship with Eric. He was my brother after all. I wanted to believe he could change. I reached out, invited him to grab coffee, tried to bond over shared memories. But every time, it felt one-sided. Eric would show up late, spend half the time bragging about some non-existent business deal, and leave me footing the bill. Looking back, I should have seen the cracks forming long before they widened into an irreparable rift. My parents' favoritism and Eric's entitlement weren't just family quirks. They were toxic patterns that had shaped our entire lives. But I ignored the warning signs, hoping that someday things would change. Little did I know, the betrayal waiting for me would shatter any hope I had of repairing those bonds. And when it happened, it wasn't just Eric who betrayed me. It was my entire family. They say love finds you when you least expect it. And for me, it came in the form of Sophia. We met 5 years ago at a friend's housewarming party. I wasn't particularly keen on attending. I just finished a grueling week at work and was in no mood for small talk. But something told me to go, and looking back, it was the best decision I'd made, at least at the time. I spotted her from across the room laughing with a group of people. She had this magnetic energy about her, effortlessly elegant, but with a warmth that drew you in. Sophia wasn't just beautiful. She had a presence that made everything around her feel lighter. When our eyes met, it felt like the chaos of the world quieted, even if just for a moment. We struck up a conversation, and before I knew it, hours had passed. We talked about everything. Our favorite books, our childhood dreams, even our embarrassing quirks. She had this way of making me feel seen, like I mattered in a way I hadn't felt in years. For someone like me, who had spent his life fighting to be noticed, Sophia's attention was a revelation. When I walked her to her car that night, she looked at me with a smile and said, "You're different. I like that." I didn't know then just how much those words would stick with me. Sophia and I started dating soon after, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was truly happy. She wasn't just a girlfriend. She was my partner in every sense of the word. We dreamed together, talking late into the night about the places we wanted to visit, the careers we wanted to grow, and the life we wanted to build. She pushed me to be better, not by demanding it, but by believing in me. When I hesitated to apply for a promotion at work, she was the one who encouraged me, saying, "You've worked hard for this. You deserve it." And when I got the job, she celebrated my win like it was her own. It wasn't just the big things either. It was the little moments that made me fall for her more each day. The way she made my morning coffee just the way I liked it. The way she'd leave notes in my lunchbox to make me smile at work. The way she'd listen, really listen, when I needed to vent. For the first time, I felt like I had someone in my corner. Someone who loved me not for what I could do, but for who I was. After a year of dating, we decided to move in together. Those were some of the best days of my life. We'd spend weekends exploring new hiking trails, trying out new recipes, and dreaming about the future. We'd talk about marriage, kids, and the kind of home we wanted to build together. I felt like I'd finally found the person I was meant to be with, the person who made all the struggles of my past worth it. Sophia was my light, my reason to keep pushing forward. With her, I felt like I could finally leave the shadow of my family's toxicity behind. For the first time, I dared to believe that I could have the happy, stable life I'd always dreamed of. When I introduced Sophia to my family, I knew they wouldn't make it easy, but I wasn't prepared for just how dismissive they'd be. My mom's first comment was, "Wow, Adam, she's gorgeous. What does she see in you?" It was meant to be a joke, but it stung. My dad barely acknowledged her, muttering something about, "Hope she likes workaholics," before retreating to his recliner. Sophia, ever the optimist, brushed it off with a smile. "They're just teasing," she said, squeezing my hand. But I knew better. It wasn't teasing. It was their way of undermining me, of reminding me that in their eyes, I wasn't good enough. Eric, on the other hand, was a different story. At first, he seemed genuinely interested in Sophia. He'd ask her about her job, her hobbies, and her favorite places to travel. But as time went on, his interest started to feel off. Eric had always been charming in that superficial way that worked well at parties, but didn't hold up under scrutiny. He knew how to make people laugh, how to draw them in, and with Sophia, he turned the charm up to full blast. He'd compliment her constantly. "You're too good for my brother," he'd joke, flashing that smug grin of his. At family dinners, he'd make it a point to sit next to her, monopolizing her attention with stories about his entrepreneurial ventures. When Sophia mentioned liking a particular wine, Eric showed up at our apartment the next week with a bottle, claiming he just happened to be in the area. At first, I tried to brush it off. Maybe he was just being friendly. But there was a glint in his eye, a tone in his voice that set my teeth on edge. It wasn't just friendliness. It was predatory. When I brought it up to Sophia, she waved it off, saying, "He's just trying to be nice, Adam. Don't overthink it." But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Eric had never shown this level of interest in anyone else I'd dated, and with our history, I couldn't help but feel like he was trying to undermine me yet again. Still, I pushed the doubts aside. I trusted Sophia. She was my partner, my rock. She wouldn't betray me, not for Eric, not for anyone. At least, that's what I told myself. Looking back now, I can see the cracks that were beginning to form, the subtle signs that something was amiss. But at the time, I was too blinded by love and hope to see the truth. I believed in Sophia, in our relationship, in the future we were building together. Little did I know, the very person I trusted most in the world was about to shatter my heart, and it would be the person I least expected who handed her the hammer. After 4 incredible years together, I knew I wanted to spend the rest of my life with Sophia. She wasn't just my girlfriend. She was my partner, my confidant, and my safe haven. I'd planned the proposal for weeks, opting for something intimate and meaningful. One evening, I cooked her favorite meal and lit candles around our apartment. It wasn't flashy, but it was us. Simple, genuine, and full of love. As we sat down to eat, I pulled out the ring and told her how much she meant to me. I spoke about how she'd changed my life, how she'd made me believe in myself when no one else did, and how I couldn't imagine a future without her. Tears welled up in her eyes as she nodded and said yes. And in that moment, I felt like the luckiest man in the world. A week later, we hosted a small engagement party with close friends and family. I should have known it wouldn't be as magical as I'd hoped. My parents arrived late, my mom carrying a gift bag that looked like it had been hastily thrown together, and my dad complaining about the traffic. Their congratulations were lukewarm at best. "Wow, Sophia," my mom said, her eyes scanning her up and down. "You're absolutely stunning. Are you sure you want to settle for Adam?" She laughed as if it was a joke, but the sting was undeniable. My dad wasn't much better. "Good luck, son," he muttered, slapping me on the back with a grin that was more mocking than supportive. And then there was Eric. From the moment he walked in, Eric was all charm and smiles, but something about his energy felt off. He made a beeline for Sophia, handing her a bouquet of flowers and congratulating her with an embrace that lingered just a little too long. Throughout the evening, he stayed glued to her side, cracking jokes and making her laugh. When I tried to join their conversation, Eric always seemed to steer it back to himself. "Oh, Adam's lucky to have you," he said with a smirk. "Not everyone could put up with him." The comments might have seemed harmless to an outsider, but they weren't. They were subtle digs, calculated to plant seeds of doubt and insecurity. At one point, I overheard him telling Sophia, "If you ever get tired of Adam's spreadsheets and work calls, you know where to find me." She laughed it off, but my stomach twisted. After the engagement party, life got busier. Sophia and I were both working long hours saving up for the wedding and a down payment on a house. At first, I chalked up her growing distance to stress. She started coming home later, always claiming she had to stay late at work or grab drinks with friends. Her phone, which she used to leave lying around, now seemed glued to her hand. Whenever I walked into the room, she'd quickly swipe away notifications or put it face down on the table. "Just work stuff," she'd say with a strained smile. There were other little things, too. She started dressing up more often, even on casual days. She'd get texts late at night and brush off my questions with a quick, "It's just a coworker." I wanted to believe her. After all, this was Sophia, the woman I loved, the woman who'd said yes to spending her life with me. Why would I doubt her? While Sophia grew distant, Eric grew bolder. He'd stop by our apartment unannounced, always bringing some excuse. "I was in the neighborhood," he'd say, or "I thought I'd drop off this wine I know Sophia likes." It was always about her, never about me. Whenever we were together, he'd make little comments that gnawed at my confidence. "Sophia deserves the best, you know," he said once, swirling a glass of wine. "You're lucky she chose you." Another time, while Sophia was out of earshot, he leaned in close and whispered, "Are you sure you're ready for marriage, Adam? It's a big commitment. Not everyone can handle it." His words were like poison, slowly corroding my sense of security. Despite the mounting signs, I chose to ignore my instincts. I convinced myself that I was being paranoid, that Eric's behavior was just his way of joking around, and that Sophia's distance was just a phase. After all, relationships go through ups and downs, right? And Eric was my brother. He might have been a self-centered jerk, but surely he wouldn't cross a line that deep. Sophia reassured me when I brought up my concerns. "You're overthinking things," she said, taking my hand. I love you, Adam. We're just busy right now, but everything will settle down soon. I wanted to believe her so badly. I clung to her words like a lifeline, ignoring the growing knot in my stomach and the little voice in the back of my mind that whispered something was wrong. As the weeks went on, Eric's comments became bolder. At a family dinner, he raised a glass and said, "To Sophia, the most beautiful woman at this table, and Adam, you're lucky to have her." Everyone laughed, but I could see the glint in his eye, the subtle challenge in his tone. Later that evening, when we were alone, he said, "You know, Adam, if you don't keep her happy, someone else will." I clenched my fists, but I didn't respond. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of knowing he'd gotten under my skin. The engagement, which should have been the happiest time of my life, was turning into a whirlwind of doubt and unease. Sophia was slipping further away, and Eric's presence loomed larger with every passing day. But I refused to see the full picture. I was blinded by love, by trust, by the desperate hope that everything would be okay. Little did I know, the storm was already brewing, and it was about to destroy everything I thought I knew about love, family, and loyalty. It started as an ordinary evening. Sophia had been acting distant for weeks, but I chalked it up to stress. She came home from work looking more tired than usual, her face pale and her movements uneasy. She sat on the edge of the couch, fidgeting with her phone, while I prepared dinner. "Adam," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper, "we need to talk." The seriousness in her tone made me freeze. My stomach churned, but I set down the plate and walked over to her. "What's wrong?" I asked, already bracing for bad news. Tears welled up in her eyes as she began to speak. "I'm pregnant," she said, her voice trembling. For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of joy. A baby? We hadn't planned for it yet, but the idea of starting a family with Sophia felt like a dream. But then I noticed the way she couldn't meet my eyes, the way her hands trembled as she clutched her phone. "It's not yours," she added, her words slicing through me like a knife. I couldn't comprehend what I was hearing. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. "What do you mean it's not mine?" I asked, my voice shaking. Sophia broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Between gasps for air, she finally blurted out the truth. "It's Eric's." The room seemed to spin around me. My heart pounded in my chest and my vision blurred. It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me, like I was free falling with no end in sight. Eric, my brother, the person I had grown up with, the one I had tried so hard to connect with despite our differences. Eric, my brother, the person I had grown up with, the one I had tried so hard to connect with despite our differences. He had done this, and Sophia, the woman I had loved, trusted, and planned to marry, had betrayed me in the most devastating way imaginable. How? I managed to choke out, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. Sophia explained through her tears. "It had started months ago," she said, "at our engagement party. Eric had approached her, telling her she was making a mistake by marrying me. He played on her insecurities, whispering sweet nothings about how she deserved better, how he could give her the life she wanted. And somehow, in a moment of weakness, or maybe something darker, she had fallen for his lies. It wasn't supposed to happen," she sobbed. "It was a mistake. I didn't mean to hurt you." A mistake? That's what she called it. As if sleeping with my brother, lying to my face for months, and getting pregnant by him was something that could be brushed aside with a simple apology. I couldn't bear to look at her. I stood up, my fists clenched, my chest heaving. "Get out," I said, my voice low and trembling with rage. "Adam, please," she begged. "Let me explain." "Get out!" I roared, the sound reverberating through the apartment. Sophia flinched but didn't argue. She grabbed her purse and fled. leaving me alone with the suffocating weight of her betrayal. But I wasn't done. I needed answers. No, I needed revenge. I grabbed my car keys and drove straight to Eric's apartment, my mind racing with anger and disbelief. When I banged on his door, it swung open almost immediately. There he was, standing there with his trademark smug grin, as if he had been expecting me. "I was wondering when you'd show up," he said casually, leaning against the doorframe. I didn't wait for an invitation. I shoved past him into his living room, my fists clenched so tightly I could feel my nails digging into my palms. "How could you?" I demanded, my voice trembling with fury. Eric shrugged, as if I'd asked him why he'd borrowed my shirt without asking. "It just happened," he said nonchalantly. "We didn't mean for it to go this far." "Didn't mean for it to go this far?" I spat. "You slept with my fiancé. You got her pregnant. How the hell does that just happen?" His expression darkened, and he crossed his arms. "Maybe if you were a better fiancé, she wouldn't have come to me," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. I saw red. Before I realized what I was doing, I lunged at him, grabbing him by the collar and slamming him against the wall. "You ruined my life," I shouted, my voice cracking under the weight of my emotions. Eric didn't fight back. He just smirked, his smugness only fueling my rage. "Face it, Adam," he said. "She chose me. Get over it." The confrontation was interrupted by the sound of our parents' voices. I hadn't even noticed them coming in. My mom gasped when she saw me pinning Eric against the wall. "Adam, stop it!" she cried, rushing to pull me away. "Do you know what he did?" I yelled, turning to face her. "He slept with Sophia. He got her pregnant." My dad's face twisted into a scowl, but not at Eric, at me. "Adam, calm down," he said sternly. "This isn't how family handles things." "Family?" I scoffed. "Is that what you call this?" "He's not my family anymore." But my mom wasn't having it. She wrapped her arms around Eric protectively, like he was the victim. "It was a mistake," she said, echoing Sophia's words. "You need to forgive him. He's your brother." "Forgive him?" I repeated, incredulous. "He destroyed my relationship, my future. And you expect me to just forgive him?" "For the sake of the baby," my mom added, as if that somehow made everything better. The audacity of it all left me speechless. I looked at my dad, hoping for some semblance of support, but he just shook his head. "You need to grow up, Adam," he said. "This is your family. You can't just walk away." Something inside me snapped. Years of pent-up resentment, frustration, and pain came pouring out all at once. "You've always taken his side," I shouted, my voice raw. "No matter what he does, no matter how much he screws up, you defend him. And now he's destroyed my life and you're still defending him." My mom tried to interject, but I held up a hand to stop her. "Number, I'm done. You want him? Fine, take him. But don't ever expect me to be part of this family again." Without waiting for a response, I stormed out, slamming the door behind me. My phone buzzed with calls and messages all night. Sophia begging for forgiveness, Eric alternating between smug and apologetic, and my parents pleading with me to be reasonable. I ignored them all. My world had been shattered, and I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't stay in their toxic orbit any longer. The days following the revelation were some of the darkest of my life. The betrayal left a gaping wound that felt impossible to heal. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, and I couldn't stop replaying the moment Sophia admitted the truth. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her tear-streaked face and heard her broken confession. "It's Eric's." I felt like my entire world had collapsed. Sophia was the person I trusted most, the one I envisioned a future with. And Eric, he was my brother. Someone I should have been able to rely on, not the person to stab me in the back. The heartbreak was a constant weight on my chest, making it hard to breathe. Everywhere I looked in our apartment, I saw reminders of her. her favorite mug on the counter, the throw blanket she loved draped over the couch, and the empty side of the bed that now felt colder than ever. Loneliness consumed me, and I found myself spiraling into despair. I withdrew from everyone. Friends reached out, concerned about my sudden disappearance, but I couldn't bring myself to talk to them. How could I explain what had happened without feeling humiliated? How could I admit that the person I loved and the brother I'd spent years trying to connect with had both betrayed me in the most intimate way possible? My work suffered too. I used up all my vacation days unable to face my colleagues. When I finally returned, I could tell they sensed something was wrong. My boss, who had always praised my dedication, started pulling me aside for check-ins, his concern thinly veiled behind corporate professionalism. I wasn't the same person I had been before. The drive that had fueled me, the confidence I'd worked so hard to build, it was all gone. In its place was a hollow shell of someone just trying to survive the day. As if dealing with my own emotions wasn't enough, my family began their relentless campaign to fix things. My parents called daily, leaving voicemail after voicemail. My mom's voice was always tearful. "Adam, please, you need to come to dinner. We're family, and families don't fall apart like this." My dad's messages were less emotional, but just as infuriating. "Stop being so dramatic, Adam. You need to grow up and face the reality that life isn't always fair." They didn't care about my pain. All they cared about was sweeping the mess under the rug and maintaining the illusion of a perfect family. Their solution: forgive Eric and Sophia, accept the baby as my niece or nephew, and move on. The very thought made my stomach turn. It didn't stop at my parents. Extended family members, some of whom I hadn't spoken to in years, suddenly started reaching out. Aunts, uncles, cousins, they all parroted the same message. "Family's everything, Adam. You can't let this tear you apart." It was as if they were reading from the same script, all orchestrated by my parents. Meanwhile, Eric and Sophia seemed to be thriving in the aftermath of their betrayal. Sophia moved in with Eric almost immediately, and the two of them began parading their relationship around like nothing had happened. Social media posts of them smiling together, holding hands, and even sharing ultrasound pictures began popping up. Every photo felt like a slap in the face. Sophia had gone from being my fiancé to flaunting her life with my brother. It was like they wanted to twist the knife deeper, to remind me every single day of what I'd lost. The worst part was the captions. They painted a picture of unexpected love and finding happiness in the most unlikely places. Sophia's posts were full of carefully curated messages about second chances and starting fresh. Eric, on the other hand, was his usual smug self, posting photos with captions like, "Living my best life with the one who gets me." I blocked them both, but mutual friends continued to send screenshots asking, "Are you okay?" Their concern was genuine, but every message felt like another reminder of my humiliation. Eventually, I realized I couldn't do this alone. The pain was too overwhelming, and the anger was eating me alive. I reached out to a therapist, desperate for someone to help me make sense of everything. In our first session, I broke down completely. I told her about Sophia, about Eric, about my parents' favoritism, and about the years of resentment I'd buried deep inside. She listened patiently, her face calm and understanding, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like someone truly heard me. She explained that my feelings were valid, that it was okay to feel betrayed, hurt, and angry. She also helped me see that the betrayal wasn't my fault. Sophia and Eric's actions were a reflection of their own flaws, not of my worth. Eric is now facing multiple lawsuits and criminal charges. His reputation is in shambles, and even my parents have started to distance themselves from him. Sophia, unemployed and disgraced, has become a pariah in our social circle. As for me, I've moved to a new city, started fresh, and begun rebuilding my life. Revenge doesn't erase the pain, but it does bring closure. They thought they could destroy me, but in the end, I was the one who walked away stronger. Sometimes, the best way to heal is to remind those who hurt you that actions have consequences, and those consequences can be devastating. After the storm had finally passed, I realized the only way to truly move on was to leave everything behind. My old life, the apartment I shared with Sophia, the city where every street held memories of her, and the family that had betrayed me, was no longer my home. I packed up what little I wanted to take with me and left the rest behind. It wasn't just a move, it was a clean slate. I relocated to a new city hundreds of miles away. I chose a place where no one knew my name, where I wasn't the guy whose brother stole his fiancé, and where I could start over without the weight of my past dragging me down. The first few weeks were tough. I was in an unfamiliar place, surrounded by strangers, and still carrying the emotional scars of everything that had happened. But for the first time in months, I felt free. I found a new job at a smaller firm, one that valued work-life balance and gave me the space I needed to breathe. My new colleagues didn't pry into my personal life, and for that, I was grateful. Slowly but surely, I began to build a routine. I explored my new city, tried out new hobbies, and even joined a gym where I could channel my frustration into something productive. One of the hardest parts of moving forward was learning to trust again. Sophia's betrayal had left deep wounds, and the idea of letting anyone get close to me felt impossible at first. But over time, I began to open up. I started with small gestures, a friendly conversation with a coworker, a smile at a stranger in a coffee shop. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Therapy remained a cornerstone of my healing process. My therapist helped me work through my lingering anger and fear, encouraging me to see that while Sophia and Eric's actions had hurt me, they didn't define me. She reminded me that not everyone would betray me, and that I deserved love and respect just as much as anyone else. Eventually, I began to let people in. I made new friends, people who saw me for who I was rather than the baggage I carried. They didn't know my story at first, and when I did finally share it, their reactions were supportive rather than judgmental. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged. The revenge I'd taken on Eric and Sophia had been satisfying in the moment. Watching Eric face legal consequences for his fraud and seeing Sophia's professional downfall brought a sense of justice that I desperately craved. They had hurt me deeply, and knowing they were facing the consequences of their actions felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders. But as the weeks turned into months, I began to realize that revenge wasn't the end of my journey. It was just one step in the process. While it had given me closure, it hadn't erased the pain or fixed the damage they'd caused. True healing came not from their downfall, but from the choices I made to rebuild my own life. Forgiveness wasn't something I was ready to offer, and maybe I never would be. But I learned that forgiveness wasn't about letting them off the hook. It was about freeing myself from the grip of their betrayal. By focusing on my own growth and happiness, I was able to move past the anger and resentment that had consumed me for so long. Looking back, I can see that their betrayal, while devastating, also taught me valuable lessons. It forced me to reevaluate the relationships in my life, to recognize the toxicity I'd been tolerating for years, and to finally prioritize my own well-being. In a way, their actions gave me the push I needed to break free from a family dynamic that had been holding me back for far too long. If there's one thing I've learned from this experience, it's that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who hurt you the most. But that doesn't mean you have to let their actions define you. You have the power to choose how you respond, to take control of your life, and to create a future that's free from their toxicity. To anyone watching this who feels trapped in a cycle of betrayal or toxic relationships, I want you to know that you're not alone. You don't have to stay in a situation that diminishes your worth or makes you feel small. It's okay to walk away, to set boundaries, and to put yourself first. In fact, it's necessary. Cutting ties with my family wasn't easy, but it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. Sometimes, the hardest choices are the ones that lead to the most growth. By removing myself from their influence, I was able to rediscover who I was and what I wanted out of life. And as for Eric and Sophia, they're no longer a part of my story. Their choices may have hurt me, but they don't get to dictate my future. I've moved on, not for their sake, but for mine. If you're watching this and you've experienced betrayal, heartbreak, or loss, remember this: you are stronger than you think. The road to healing isn't easy, but it's worth it. Focus on yourself. Surround yourself with people who uplift you, and don't be afraid to start over if you need to. Life is too short to waste on people who don't value you. And that's the end of my story. A journey of love, betrayal, heartbreak, revenge, and ultimately, healing. It wasn't an easy road, and there were moments when I thought I'd never recover. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that even in the darkest times, you have the power to rise above. You don't have to let betrayal define you. Instead, you can use it as a stepping stone to reclaim your life and build something stronger, something better. For me, cutting ties with toxic people wasn't just about revenge. It was about finding peace. Moving forward didn't mean forgetting what happened. It meant refusing to let their actions control my happiness. And now, I'm in a better place, surrounded by people who value and respect me for who I am. If you've enjoyed this story or found inspiration in it, don't forget to hit that like button and share this video with someone who might need to hear it. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to Unheard Stories and turn on the notification bell, because we have so many more incredible real-life tales to share with you. Speaking of which, here's a little teaser for our next story. Imagine finding out that your best friend has been secretly sabotaging your career for years, and then deciding to turn the tables in the most spectacular way possible. You won't want to miss it, so stay tuned. Thank you for watching, and remember, you are stronger than the people who try to break you. Until next time, take care of yourselves and keep moving forward. See you in the next one.